So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll do the introduction, hopefully a fairly brief one, and then we'll move over to Zurich to take over from there. We dodged the ice bullet. Those in Asheville know that we were warned of freezing rain today, which luckily did not come much. And our counterparts in Raleigh, North Carolina had a bit of a warning for that as well, but that did not happen, and we're very pleased to have everybody here today. The Asheville Young Center is pleased to present today's talk in combination with a number of other organizations, which we'll talk about in a moment, and are very pleased to have Andreas Jung and Murray Stein leading today. I think this will be a fabulous experience for most all. We have, yet again, multiple centers and numerous countries joining us today, and we're pleased to have those people with us as well. A few quick thanks I'd like to offer, first of all, to UNCA, University of North Carolina, Asheville. That's where I'm seated right now, as are about 20 to 25 people in this room today also. They have done just a marvelous job in helping us host these conferences. They do the technological pieces. The Department of Psychology has co-hosted as well, and including the Department of Distance Learning, and they are helping tremendously. They're connected with the NC Run system. They're the folks working behind the scenes. So you may occasionally hear them jump in, but they are coordinating all these efforts from Raleigh, North Carolina, and we really appreciate their help in pulling off this today. The AJC University, which sounds odd to us English speakers, but AJC is German for ETH, which is a new university that we're connected with today. Very excited for that. AJC is also known as the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, if I'm getting that correct. And interesting about AJC is that is where Carl Jung was a professor at. One of his main appointments was at the AJC. And they have agreed to host both today's talk, where Murray and Andreas are at, and also our next one coming March 31st, which I haven't told you much about yet, but we'll be looking at Wolfgang Pauli, some other professors as well, looking at one number of areas. We'll talk more about that down the road, but we're having another one from AJC in about 2 months. So thank you so much, especially for the technical people. Remember, it's 11 o'clock here in the morning, but it's 5 p.m. there at night. So the technical folks are staying from 5 to 8 p.m. on a Friday. So we want to really, really thank you guys for staying late. I very, very much appreciate that. We are going to try to move some of these to Thursday. The next one's on a Thursday, so we don't eat into their weekend too much. Next is Sonoma State University, where it's early in the morning. Not sure how early, but it's pretty early there for them, 8 o'clock, if I'm remembering the time zones correct. There's Tom Singer and Laurel Gabe coming in with their coffee, hopefully. Yes, I see their coffee. And I'd like to thank them, Tom and Laurel, as well as Sonoma State University. They've been graciously offered to host this part. What we've done with Sonoma State, they're one of our core sites that tries to engage with us as much as possible. So we really get a feel of the West Coast with this. They're connected through Tom Singer with the San Francisco Jung Institute. So we've got some wonderful Jungian analysts from there as well. So thank you, Sonoma State. And lastly, I would like to thank ISAP Zurich. ISAP stands for the International School of Analytical Psychology, Zurich. And that's one of the Jungian institutes there in Zurich. And that's where Murray Stein is the president. And ISAP Zurich has been very, very helpful with us over the years. They've helped in numerous ways. They've loaned us many of their leading Jungian analysts who are our presenters quite often, and they've done a number of joint projects with us. So a very special thanks to ISAP Zurich. A couple of small housekeeping points, and then I will introduce Murray and Andreas. One is I need to announce that we have no commercial support for our presenters, topics, or programs. There are no pharmaceutical industries behind the scenes supporting this whatsoever. So we are support-free, which is nowadays necessary to say. Related to that, we will be sending out a survey, hopefully later today, to everybody registered, and it'll be a brief, so many item survey, just asking your experience about today. Some of it are the official questions of did we meet the learning objectives and how was the sound and the audio, but then there'll also be opportunities to add what you liked, what you didn't like, what topics you'd like to see. So take a few moments today or tomorrow if you can while it's fresh in your memory and fill out our survey. Okay, cell phones. I'm sure everybody knows this, but turn off your cell phones. Double check just in case, because the cell phones, when they go off, all the mics are live, at least the majority are, so you really disrupt hundreds of people when the cell phone goes off, so do check to make sure it's on vibrate if you would. We are taping today's seminar, so if anybody does not want their voice or image used, ask any questions in writing to me or through email or to the local host presenter, and we can ask your question if you don't want to speak with a taped recording. There will be one break. This is a 3-hour seminar, and we'll have one 10 to 15-minute break, approximately about halfway through. If you need to quietly leave in the middle, otherwise, feel free to do so. All right, let me introduce our speakers today. Murray Stein is well known to our network. He has lectured countless times. I've lost track of how many times Murray has lectured to us, but it's quite a few. And there's a reason why it's quite a few, because he is such a wonderful, wonderful speaker. And he will be gracing us with his eloquency today as well. He is very good at breaking down very complex Jungian thoughts into very understandable yet deep ideas. And I think you'll see that yet again from Murray. He is president of the International School of Analytical Psychology, ISAP, which we mentioned earlier. He's past president of the IAAP, which is the large international organization of Jungian analysts. He founded Tupac Institute as a and has a book out that you all should know about called Jungian Psychoanalysis, Working in the Spirit of Carl Jung. In fact, Len Cruz is going to bring that up to me right now so I can show it to the camera. It is a wonderful book. Murray is the editor of this book and has brought numerous Jungian analysts together, writing various chapters of it. But it's really, I think, the definitive text of Jungian psychoanalysis. And this is his 3rd or 4th edition, if I'm remembering. But it's just a wonderful book. So thank you, Murray. Andreas Jung, we are so delighted to have Andreas join us today. Andreas, of course, is the grandson of Carl Jung and a Jung family member. That's really not why he's here. That's part of why he's here, but the main focus is in a different area with that. He also lives in the primary home of Carl Jung, the home that Jung built, and has lived in there for quite some time. But that also isn't the main reason why he's here with us today. The main reason he's here is he is an architect, professional architect, skilled in designing homes and research, and has some thoughts about integrating architect and psyche. And I think you'll hear some neat pieces of that today, and we are so delighted to have him join us with that. The other thing you should know about Andreas Jung is he also has a book, and I was able to bring our copy of that today. This is The House That C.G. Jung Built. Many of the photos, I believe, will be some of the photos you'll see today, but it is a beautiful picture book, lots of large pictures in here, and really goes through step by step kind of the process of how Carl Jung's house in Kusnacht came about, of how it was designed, the different places, and how it's evolved. It's still an active home. He's living in there currently, and you really get a sense of both restoration of the house and the history of it. So if you get a chance to look at that, it's linked on our website. You can click and get to the Amazon spaces through our website as well. So again, I want to thank Murray Stein and Andreas Jung for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. One thing that's a little different here in Zurich today also is that we have an audience in Zurich. Chris, can you show the audience? There. These are students from ISAP, and so we have a part of the network today is also does include Zurich in a much broader sense than usual. Usually we broadcast from Zurich, speak from Zurich, but without the participation of any of our other people resident and studying at the school in Zurich. So today they will also participate in the questions and discussion as they feel they would like to, just as you do from Asheville, Sonoma, and elsewhere. What we're going to begin today is a series that Steve and I, in our discussions, have decided to call "The House That Jung Built." The House That Jung Built. It's a series. It will be a series of seminars. This is the first one, focusing on the many facets, or on some of the many facets, of Jung's lifelong oeuvre. As we all know, Jung was a very complex personality. There are many sides to him. He did many things besides write the 20 volumes of the collected works. And we're going to focus on try to get an idea of the whole picture, and then hone in on a few of the special areas. And today we're going to hone in on the architectural area. So the house that Jung built, in a sense, is metaphorical, but today it's also going to be quite literal. We're going to look at, with Andreas Jung's help, we're going to look at two houses that Jung had built, designed and built. For those of you who've seen the Red Book and the Red Book exhibitions that have traveled around the United States, it's now here in Zurich, you know that Jung did have a great interest in expressing himself artistically. The Red Book is one of his artistic efforts. Houses are another. There are sculptures and other things. So putting all that together is going to be part of the task of this series, to see different areas of Jung's capability, interest, and trying to link the pieces to see how it all hangs together. So we're speaking about the house that Jung built, not the houses that Jung built, because we are going to look for connections between all of these various different kinds of activities. And in this first one of the series, this first seminar of the series, I've given it the title Foundations of Psychological Theory and Some Personal Architectural Creations, Interconnections Between Spirit and Matter. So if we take Jung's intellectual creations, his writings, his theories and so on, as his spiritual heritage, the spiritual part of the house that he built, we're also going to try to connect that to the material world and the expressions that he gave to his personality, to his intellect, to his spirit in a material form. So interconnections between spirit and matter, that will be sort of the underlying thread of our seminar today. And in the first part, I'll speak for about 30 minutes or so and give you a very quick and dirty overview of the creation of Jung's theory from about 1900, when he began at the Burgholzli Clinic, through the Red Book period until about 1930, just hitting a couple of high points to sketch in this part of the house that Jung built. And in the next seminar that Steve mentioned, which will take place at the end of March, we're going to focus on the connections, making connections to history and to science. That is, the ways in which Jung tried to connect his oeuvre to a historical tradition. And I'm going to talk there about Gnosticism and alchemy, Jung's search for roots in the Western tradition, cultural tradition. We're going to have a guest, Angela Graf Nold, who's going to speak about Jung's AJC lectures during the 1930s, where Jung is making connections to the history of psychology in those lectures. And then we're going to have another guest. Either it will be Reinhard Nesper, professor of chemistry, physical chemistry here at the AJC, or a professor, a colleague of his named Karl von Mayen, who is presently editing the dreams of Wolfgang Pauli. And one or the other will speak about Jung and Wolfgang Pauli, and the attempt that Jung made, a very serious attempt that Jung made to connect his oeuvre in psychology, depth psychology, to modern science, quantum physics. So that seminar will be in search of connections to history and science. So to today's seminar, let me just very briefly give you an overview of what Jung created in the way of theoretical structures, concepts, between the time he started his career officially as a psychiatrist at the Berkholzli Clinic in 1900 until he finished the Red Book in 1930. And as I say, this will have to be very quick and very dirty. But I want to give as background to what's going to come in a few minutes from our guest, the intellectual creativity that was going on in those 30 years in Jung's mind, and that he committed to paper in one way or another, and in his lectures and theorizing and in his teaching. Now the first period, I'm going to divide this into 3 sections. I'm going to call the first section the Berkholzli years, and this is roughly the period between 1900 and 1913, but mainly I'm going to look at the very early part of that, from 1900 to about 1905 or 6, 7, 10, in that first period, where Jung elaborates the theory of the complexes. This is foundational to analytical psychology. Here he's laying the groundwork for what he's later going to build on massively in his later theorizing and building out from this basis. And I want to just say a few words about how he created that foundational piece that he was never to leave. And I'm going to emphasize that each of these pieces that he put in place stays in the house, becomes a part of the house. He doesn't discard it. He builds on it and he connects it to what comes later. The second part I'm going to call the Freud years. That's from roughly 1906 to 1913. And in that period, I'm going to place the elaboration or the discovery, the building up, in a sense, of the theory, part of his theory that relates to the persona and the shadow. And then in the third part, I'm going to call the Red Book years. That's from 1913 until he stops writing in the Red Book, 1930. And in that piece, we see the work that goes into the creation of his theory of archetypes of the collective unconscious and the theory of individuation. And I'm going to just mention briefly another piece that goes into the house that Jung built, and that is psychological types, that comes right in the middle of that Red Book period. So you see there's a lot to cover here, and I can't do it justice. If you want to read further about it, I refer you to my book, Jung's Map of the Soul. And in that book, Jung's Map of the Soul, I use the metaphor of Jung as an explorer. And this is a metaphor that he applies to himself quite often. And he often says, we're in the exploring phase. We're in the early phases of discovering the psyche. This is explorative work. I'm a pioneer, pioneering work. Those of you who live in the United States, you know who the pioneers were. They come to a foreign land. They don't know anything about it. They have to clear the land. They have to make roads. They have to clear fields. They have to discover what's there and then take hold of it, take ownership of it. And that's the way I see Jung's entering into the psyche, starting in 1900, starting to explore. And as he goes, creating maps of what he finds. These are intellectual structures that orient him and give him an idea of what's going on in this vast unknown territory and take him the next step. So he continues pioneering as he goes. And these first 30 years are his great pioneering phase. After that, I would say it's mostly consolidation, further elaboration, deepening, extending, until you get to the years of his collaboration with Wolfgang Pauli, where again, I think he enters into quite a new and deeper understanding of the relation of the psyche to the world and to the anima mundi. A kind of natural philosophy is born in his conversations with Wolfgang Pauli that really is the final piece that he puts in place in this magnificent intellectual structure that he builds in the course of these 60-odd years from 1900 to 1960. In the beginning, when he came to the Berkholzli Clinic, he was a raw recruit to psychiatry. He hadn't studied psychology formally at the university. He was a psychiatrist. He studied medicine. He had a great interest in philosophy, which you can perceive if you read the lectures that he gave at his fraternity house at the University of Basel, the Zofingia lectures that are now published. There are 4 of them. And you can see that he was very interested in history of philosophy, even theology. His 4th lecture is on the theologian Ritschl, 19th century, very important 19th century Protestant theologian, where he challenges Ritschl on the nature of transmission of culture, transmission of numinous images. He doesn't believe it's done rationally. He thinks it's done through some other means that he can't identify yet, but he would be able to later once he gets to his theory of archetypes and synchronicity and so on. But he knows there's something wrong with a rational idea of transmission of culture purely by one generation teaching the next generation. That was Ritschl's theory. It goes all the way back. So this kind of a chain of transmission that goes back to the early years of Christianity that's then passed on generation to generation. And you can say that that explanation doesn't satisfy Jung's mystical side. I would say from a psychological point of view, it doesn't give a very good explanation for the irrational nature of the human and how human beings do communicate with each other in rational and non-rational ways, and how there are transmissions of images and ideas that don't seem to be so causally linked and so in a rational pattern. So when he gets to the Berkholzli, he's got a lot of philosophical ideas, but he doesn't have any psychological knowledge to speak of. And there he, for the first time, he reads Freud in 1900 when his mentor and teacher, Professor Bleuler, suggests that he buy Freud's new book, just out, fresh off the press, Interpretation of Dreams. And Freud reads it, Jung reads Freud for the first time with considerable interest, reviews it for his colleagues at the Berkholzli, and then puts it aside and begins his research using a tool that he adopted and adapted, a 19th century psychological tool called the word association experiment. And he and a team of researchers at the Berkholzli Clinic began applying a modified version of the word association experiment to the patients at the Berkholzli Clinic to see what they could discover. And in the course of that, Jung made some very, very important intellectual breakthroughs. And he began getting a sense that there is something active and interesting beneath the level of our ordinary everyday consciousness. And one can stimulate factors, irrational factors that surprise the person who's taking the test and surprise the person who's giving the test, and show themselves in several characteristic ways. And so he developed what were then called the 10 complex indicators. One of the main features being that if you give a series of test words to a testee, and measure their response time, you will find that there's a kind of average response time, and then on certain words, there is a delayed response time, occasionally no response at all, or other strange features that characterize that response. Clang responses, stuttering, occasionally kind of physiological responses, sweat breaking out on the forehead, and so on and so forth. And Jung and this team of researchers began measuring these phenomena and writing about them in the word association experiment papers that were then published. And he came upon the idea that beneath the surface of consciousness there are clusters of feeling-toned, associated memories, images. When you touch them, they have a peculiar response. They disturb consciousness in certain characteristic ways. And he called these the complexes. So that was his first major building stone in the intellectual house that he would build. The theory of complexes, feeling-toned contents that lie behind the surface or under the surface of consciousness that we're subject to, that we can be disturbed by, whether it's by something we think or we remember, or somebody says something and we feel a peculiar response, we become emotional, we can't think straight depending on the strength of the arousal, we can become possessed, we can become angry, we have all kinds of reactions. And nowadays we say, well, we're in a complex, we're caught in a complex or possessed by a complex. So that is the basic discovery of these early years at the Berk-Holzli Clinic using the word association experiment. And then, of course, because these complexes exist out of sight, so to speak, Jung asked himself, well, who am I speaking to when I talk to you? Or who is speaking when I speak? Who is that? I. And here I think he then would learn from Freud later, or maybe quite early, when he read The Interpretation of Dreams, that there is a name for that. Das Ich, auf Deutsch, das Ich, very simple word, simply the I. When it was translated into English, they tried to make it sound more scientific and sophisticated, so they gave it a Latin word, the ego. The ego, then Jung said, well, that's the center of consciousness. That's the I who speaks, but that I can take on different forms, different shapes. It's a shapeshifter. It can become emotional. It can become sometimes dissociated from itself. It goes into a mood or into a complex. It can be taken over. And so the relation between the ego and the complexes became an interesting subject of investigation and discovery. And then he came upon Freud and made that connection in 1906, went and visited Freud in Vienna, and as you all know very well, they struck up a very deep and intense and mutually satisfying and unsatisfying in the end relationship. They both tried to use each other in certain ways. They both felt in the end quite misused by each other. I won't go into that part of the story today, but from this experience with Freud and from Jung's exposure to psychoanalysis, and of which he became the representative as the first president of the International Psychoanalytic Association, which was formed in 1910. Jung really was the champion of the Freudian psychoanalysis in those early days of psychoanalysis. From all of this, he learned what he later says quite a lot about the personal unconscious and the shadow. That Jung felt that he, in Freud, had found a master prober of the shadow life of civilized human beings. And this unveiling of the human foibles, the things we try to hide from ourselves, certainly hide from other people, try to cover up, our less than noble motives and emotions, all of this you can read about in Freud's interpretation of dreams, which is a masterly analysis of his own shadow motivations, his ambition, his envy, his greed. Most of the dreams in that book are his own dreams, are Freud's own dreams, and so it's really an account of his self-analysis. A master of suspicion, that's Freud. And I think Jung learned quite a lot about the shadow from Freud. He learned about Freud's shadow also, and he learned about his own shadow in the course of that. And forever after, Jung would always give Freud a great deal of credit for really exposing this side of the human personality that he would thereafter call the shadow side, to giving Freud credit for holding that up so brilliantly, particularly in the highly hypocritical Viennese culture of the fin de siècle, from the 19th to the 20th century. The Viennese were famous for their hypocrisy. They would give you such a nice smile on the surface, and behind your back they would stab you and criticize you and say nasty things about you. They were famous for that. Maybe they still are. I don't know. But the Viennese character was totally unmasked and taken apart by Freud. And I think Freud enjoyed doing it as well. And Jung could apply those same tools to his rather more stolid and serious Swiss counterparts, probably. But this discovery of the shadow, Jung would later not only credit Freud for, but put down the realization of the shadow. Getting a glimpse into one's own shadow is really the beginning of the individuation process. Without that, you can't go very far in individuation. Until you realize your own self-contradictions, your own, the discrepancy between what you say and what you do, the difference between who you are publicly and who you are privately, until you put that together and get a really honest picture of yourself, you can't really go very much further in the individuation process. That's why it's so painful. Also, Jung was the son of a Protestant parson. I'm the son of a Protestant parson. I know what this phenomenon looks like. The Protestant parson is one person in the pulpit on Sunday morning. He's another person at home on Sunday night with his family. He's very irritable typically. He's not very generous to his family. He doesn't have time for them. He has time for everybody else in the world. He's very nice. He has a great smile. He's a politician. But at home, you see another side of that person. And so that experience in the household probably taught Jung quite a bit about this discrepancy between persona and shadow. And when he came to Freud, he learned about some of the deeper aspects of the shadow, some of the deeper needs that the shadow is trying to fulfill with the tricks it plays and so on. And so in those Freudian years, he discovered the shadow and what he would then call the persona. Now this language is his own language. This is not Freudian language. Persona, shadow is Jung's language. Complex is Jung's language. So as he's building his house, he's giving these various aspects, think of them as rooms or sides of the house, he's giving them his own names. And this is characteristic of Jung. He gives everything his own stamp. Everything that Jung would touch in his lifetime, he gave it his own twist. Now this is the mark of genius. When Jung read something like Gnosticism or alchemy, he's often criticized for misreading it. Of course he misread it. He misreads everything. He misreads everybody he reads, but not just for the sake, they aren't just mistakes. He's using them. And this is what Harold Bloom calls a strong misreading. Every creative genius does this. They take the past and they take the tradition and they turn it to their own ends. And you can see Jung doing this over and over again with everything he touches, every source that he cites. He takes what he wants out of it and he puts it into his own house and he says, that's what it means. But that's what it means within his house. That might not be what it means in somebody else's house or what the author intended or what the tradition understands. But within the Jungian house, That's what it means. So this kind of strong misreading and you could say twisting, but taking materials from the world of tradition, the world of nature too, and putting it to his own use is absolutely a hallmark of Jung. But it's the mark of every true genius, creator type. You expect that of them. And then the third part, which I'm not going to say very much about, I've covered already in 2 seminars on the Red Book. Not going to say anything about the Red Book, but I'm going to call this the Red Book years, from the time that Jung broke with Freud in 1913, beginning of 1913, until 1930. And this, you could say, is Jung's major period of creativity. This is the period in which, as I sometimes say, Jung became a Jungian. He really took what he knew from psychiatry. He took his what he had gleaned from his word association experiments and theory of complexes. He took what he had gotten from Freud in the way of shadow and persona understandings. And he took everything to another level and gave it a whole new context. And he did that by setting up a foundational idea that he would forever after be known for, and that is his discovery of, or his putting together of pieces to create the idea of the collective unconscious and the archetypes of the collective unconscious. So, as he would say, he just went deeper. He went deeper into the territory, and he mapped another region. He mapped a more foreign, a more wild, a more primitive region, a region that other people hadn't really gotten into before then, or a depth that other people hadn't looked at before. You can see it that way. Or he just put things together in his own way, again, in a very, very interesting and scientifically fruitful hypothesis, namely that we are all heirs to a very profound human heritage called the archetypal layer, or the collective unconscious. Belongs to all of us. It belongs to humanity as such. It is universal. These are elements of the personality that are not ours. We belong to them. Your ego is but a tiny fraction of the wholeness of the human psyche. And so he created a much, much bigger picture. The house that he built is an immense mansion. And the extent and depth of it really go out from this period of creativity where he's exploring the archetypes of the collective unconscious. As we saw in the Red Book seminars, and if you read the Red Book, he has firsthand experience of a lot of the material that he's going to write about later as the archetypes of the collective unconscious, and particularly archetypal images that he's dealing with, dialoguing with, talking about, painting, and so on, doing all of that work that goes into the Red Book. That's on one level, the creation of the Red Book, but while he's doing that, at the same time, in the same period, he's theorizing about it. And he writes basically the foundations of what would become the 2 essays in analytical psychology later. If you look at the collected works, the first 5 volumes belong to the first 2 periods until he broke with Freud in 1913. That's the first 5 volumes, and everything after that, from volume 6 through volume 18, comes later. In this period, he also produced another map, in addition to the maps that you find in the Red Book, like the Systema Munditotius, the mandalas, and so on. He produced another map. A map is an orienting device. It tells you where you are and points out north and south and kind of gives you a picture where things are. And that is psychological types. Psychological types, which is a whole psychology in itself. He published in 1921. While he was painting some of the pictures in the Red Book and the calligraphy and working on all of that, so that one level is the Red Book level, and then you have the theoretical level. And if you read Psychological Types, and very few people do read that whole book, it's a thick book, he pours a vast amount of scholarship. He'd been reading philosophy and theology and history of culture and stuff from all over the world, which is already present in Volume 5, but in Volume 6 he puts it together in another way and elaborates the idea of the psychological types. Psychological types are a kind of compass, and they can give you orientation about yourself, about your spouse, your partner, your children. It's widely used in the business world to orient people to tasks and things that they might be better at than other things. It's a very useful device, and it really orients you to consciousness mainly. It doesn't have too much to do with the archetypes of the complexes, the collective unconscious. It has to do with orienting consciousness. But in addition to that, he's also deepening his understanding of the archetypal material. He's elaborating it and he's thinking about it further, and he will then go on in the years after 1930, when he picks up alchemy, really to develop some of the ideas that have their roots in this period. But I would say by 1930, he's got all the pieces of his psychological theory in place, with the exception maybe of synchronicity, which is going to come later after and in relation to his discussions with Wolfgang Pauli and trying to link depth psychology and modern physics and approach the understanding of the world as a unit, a unity in which psyche and matter coexist and are two sides of a single coin, as he says in one place. But I'm going to leave that for next time. And I'm going to stop my presentation at this point and leave perhaps 5 or 10 minutes for some questions or discussion if you would like to ask about this, and then we will go on to the next segment with Andreas Jung. Are there any questions?
That's good. Well, thank you, Murray. That was wonderful. One announcement for our home viewers looking at the computerized version of this. You've probably become aware that we have a new format set up, which is really nice. You can see the slides separately as well as the speaker. You can maximize the size. There's a little button on the left-hand side that says click here to send a question to me. That doesn't work. It looks like it works. You'll send a message, but I've asked the NC Ren folks, and it goes into the black void, and we'll never see it again. So you can push the button, but nothing will happen. So if you want to send us a question, send it to info@ashevilleyoungcenter.org. That's the address you were sent earlier, info@ashevilleyoungcenter. Don't press the button. Okay. Let's go to Sonoma first, and then we'll check in with Asheville. Sonoma, do you have any questions?
I don't think we have any questions, but that was a wonderful summary. That was really nice.
I have, it's sort of a question, comment, I guess. Murray as always puts things in an elegant way. I too have thought of Jung's work in terms of building a house, but since I spent a lot of time in Vermont, I sometimes think of it as a ramshackle farmhouse rather than a mansion, because I never, and Murray, you might correct me, I always, in my reading of Jung, felt that he would develop a theory and then something else would capture him and it would be like a new room that sort of fit on, but there was no comprehensive master plan at the beginning. It was like a series of add-on rooms, all of which might fit in its own organic way over time. And so I've used, to myself at least, the analogy of a Vermont farmhouse, which gets built over a long period of time with different rooms serving different functions at different periods of time. It's kind of a comment, I guess.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, how are you doing? California, how's the weather out there? The weather's okay in California today?
It's wonderful.
Oh, good. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Tom. There was no plan at the beginning. Jung didn't build his theoretical house with a finished plan in mind at the beginning, and that's why I use two metaphors. One is the discovery, exploration, pioneering, mapping metaphor, and today I'm using the building the house metaphor, but I appreciate the ramshackle idea. I think it is somewhat built as he goes, step by step. On the other hand, there is a way in which he integrates things as he goes. So it isn't that he builds one room and then he gets interested in something else and builds that room and there isn't any link between them. For instance, theory of complexes, which is foundational at the beginning, he will still be talking about complexes in his Mysterium Conjunctionis in 1955. Much later, he's using the ideas that he developed earlier. The same thing with psychological type. So he pulls them forward as he goes and integrates them so that in the end, I think you have a relatively coherent but not complete, I would say, or perfect masterpiece or finished mansion, a beautiful house. But I think as a scientist, Jung would want to leave it open and incomplete. Science always leaves open the possibility of revision. It's different from art. If Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel, he doesn't want it revised 20 years later. Somebody else comes along with another idea. It's done. Art finishes things. Science leaves open possibilities. So I think, and Jung would call many of these ideas of his hypotheses. So it's a house that can also be remodeled, can be changed, can be added on to, can be redecorated with new. Now we have neuroscience. What do we do with neuroscience in Jung's house? It's new information. Jung didn't have it. I think we can probably integrate it into the other pieces that Jung gave us without having to discard too much. So there's this kind of elasticity in his work, and an attempt to integrate, but not perfectly. And I say that at the beginning of my book, Jung's Map of the Soul, too. One of the things I like about Jung is that it's not a finished system. If you've ever read a thinker with a finished system, like Hegel or in theology, Tillich, people like that, they're very exciting for a while, and then you feel totally trapped in their ideas because they've said everything, they've done it, all the ends are tied together, and there's no room for any further creativity. The nice thing about Jung is there's this elastic openness to it. So ramshackle, I like that. Thanks, Tom. But I think
Let me ask an asphalt question, if we can. Len, I think you had a question you wanted to ask?
I did. I had the same impression Tom did, of how there were so many accretions. But Murray, I'd be interested in knowing, do you have a sense of anything that Jung struggled to integrate and perhaps either rejected or never did reject, but struggled to let go of? Because it does seem like you described almost everything finds a place.
right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that he developed very far and just let go of, except Freud, maybe. I think he realized that when he'd gone a certain ways down the road with Freud, that was not going to be his life's work. It really was a false direction, and the reservations that he had about Freud and his way of thinking and his way of putting things together and his reductionism and his scientism and so on, I think bothered Jung from the beginning. And so in the end, I don't think he totally rejected Freud either. He certainly picked pieces from it and used them, but if there's one thing that he, as you say, didn't carry forward or rejected, it would be that piece. I'll think about that some more. Nothing else really comes to mind. The psychological types, is a big piece. He didn't, some people criticize him for not doing more with it later. He wrote it and kind of put it aside, but he never leaves it, even as late as Mysterium Conjunctionis, where he's talking about all kinds of other things. He will then come back and use the four functions. The number 4 was so important to him. And so I think he could have taken psychological types further, as other people have, like John Beebe in San Francisco, and others have taken Myers-Briggs and all that. He could have done much more with it. He put it aside and he didn't develop it further, but he didn't reject it either. Some people would say it's psychological types is really to the side of the mainstream of analytical psychology theory and practice. Others put it more in the center. I wouldn't say he rejected it, but he didn't make it central. So I think maybe we should move on to the next very important piece of this seminar, and then after our speaker, Andreas Jung, is finished, we'll take a break when he finishes his formal presentation, and then after the break, we'll come back with questions and have discussion in the third part, if that's okay with you all, okay?
Yes, that sounds great.
His piece lasts about an hour or so, and then we'll have the break. Well, Steve already introduced Andreas Jung. He is the grandson of C.G. Jung. He lives in the house that Jung built, and Jung and Emma built together, and he's going to tell us about that house, and he's going to tell us about Bollingen and some other things that have to do with Jung's architectural interests and artistic interests. But he's also going to link Jung's architecture to some of his ideas and some of his, you could say, spiritual aspirations and his theoretical, also his theoretical work. So I'm so pleased to have you with us, Andreas. Thank you for accepting this invitation. It wasn't easy. Andreas is speaking in English. His native language, of course, is Swiss German. And so he's going to read the text, but he will go slowly. And please save your questions for the period following the break. Andreas?
Thank you. Well, hello. I have been invited to speak to you through a medium that is entirely new for me. Some of you I may see as real or virtual persons, but most of you are hidden in the mist of infinity. And I do hope you will help me to surmount the distance in between. I'm an architect and a conservator, and so it is quite natural that I should report on the houses which C.G. Jung built during his life. But those houses are closely connected with another particular work of his, as Mary told already, with the newly published Red Book. As you will learn, the inner and the outer world of C.G. Jung are interconnected and form a single system. Ich muss, glaube ich, das mal aufladen. Yes, so this is the. In the following, I will show you various pictures and associate them with personal statements by Jung. The quotations are often shortened or combined. Quote, I was in a house I did not know. It was my house. I found myself in the upper story, where there was a kind of saloon furnished with fine old pieces in Rococo style. Descending the stairs, I reached the ground floor. There, everything was much older, and I realized that this part of the house must date from about the 15th or 16th century. I discovered a stone stairway that led down into the cellar. Descending again, I found myself in a beautifully watered room which looked exceedingly ancient. Examining the walls, I discovered that they dated from Roman times. Again, I saw a stairway of narrow stone steps leading down into the depths. These two I descended and entered a low cave cut into the rock. Thick dust lay on the floor, and in the dust were scattered bones and broken pottery like remains of a primitive culture. End quote. Jung had this dream in 1909 when he and Sigmund Freud traveled for the first time to the United States. It was this dream that led Jung over the years to the principal cognition of the collective unconscious. The affinity of this dream with the draft Jung made 2 years earlier for his home in Küsnacht is striking. It's the picture you see. Jung regarded the different stories of this dream house as a symbolic image of the layers of the human psyche, leading from the personal conscious to the collective unconscious. So the architecture of the house served in the dream as image for a psychic configuration. In the following, I will attempt a reversal of observation to understand what general and particular psychic relevance C.G. Jung accorded to his own buildings. I will start with his childhood and point out the emotional imprinting to be found there. Then I will show you the development of the private home in Küsnacht and later of the tower in Bollingen. In between, I will present the so-called Red Book and some intermediate encounters. Finally, the stone in Bollingen. I will close with a personal remark on the I Ching. Quote, "My memories begin with my second or third year. I recall the vicarage, the garden, the laundry house, the church, the castle, the falls." End quote. With these words, C.G. Jung started the report of his life, listing the appearances important to him. As son of the country parson Paul Jung, he lived for his first 4 years in a modest vicarage in the small village of Laufen above the Rhine Falls. What impressed the little boy probably the most was the castle on the hanging rock and the mass of crashing water. Quote, a lovely summer evening. An aunt took me out in front of the house. On the far horizon, the chain of the Alps lay bathed in glowing sunset reds. Now, look over there. The mountains are all red. For the first time, I consciously saw the Alps. Then I was told that the village children would be going on a school outing to the Uetliberg near Zurich. I wanted so much to go too. From then on, the Uetliberg and Zurich became an unattainable land of dreams, near to the glowing snow-covered mountains. My mother took me to the Thurgau to visit friends who had a castle on Lake Constance. I could not be dragged away from water. The sun glistened on the water. The lake stretched away and away into the distance. This expanse of water was an inconceivable pleasure to me, an incomparable splendor. At that time, the idea became fixed in my mind that I must live near a lake. Without water, I thought nobody could live at all. End quote. Now we move. At the age of 4 years, the boy moved with his parents into the parsonage at Kleinhüningen, a small village near the old town of Basel. Both parents had grown up in Basel. Jung's grandfather, Carl Gustav Jung, had made a great contribution as professor of medicine, while his other grandfather, Samuel Breiswerk, taught Oriental languages. Jung's father, Paul, although gifted, worked as a modest parson in the hamlet. On the picture, you recognize Jung at a later age in the window. This is the parsonage in Kleinhüningen. Quote, "The house where my parents lived was an 18th century parsonage, and in there was a dark room. Here all the furniture was good, and all paintings hung on the walls. I began looking in my father's relatively modest library, which in those days seemed impressive to me, for books that would tell me what was known." Yes, that was known. Quote, "Instead of daydreaming, I began building castles and artfully fortified emplacements out of stones, using mud as mortar. The fortress of Hüningen, which at that time was still intact, serving me as model. I studied all the available fortification plans of Vauban and was soon familiar with all the technicalities." Vauban is the architect of this fortification. In the picture you see at left the little hamlet of Kleinhüningen, and across the river the fortress of Hüning. One is in Switzerland and the other is in France. Quote, "To my intense confusion, it occurred to me that there was actually two different persons. One of them was the schoolboy. The other was an old man who lived in the 18th century. I had seen an 18th century statuette consisting of two painted figures. One was old Dr. Stückelberger, the other a patient of his. The old doctor had buckled shoes, which, in a strange way, I recognized as my own." End quote. In his early years, Jung realized that there were two souls housing in his breast. He called them his personality number 1 and personality number 2. The first lived in the present and had to bother with everyday occurrences. The other belonged to the past and dealt with the earth and sky. Quote, "My way to school led along the river. Suddenly I saw approaching a ship with a great mainsail. My imagination took wings. If, instead of this river, all were a lake, then everything would be different. There would be a hill rising out of the lake with a little medieval city. On the rock stood a well-fortified castle with a tall keep, a watchtower. This was my house. In there, the rooms were simply paneled and rather small. There was an uncommonly attractive library where you could find everything worth knowing. The secret of the keep I knew alone. Here I had a kind of laboratory in which I made gold." End quote. We find already hints and essential motives that would occupy C.G. Jung for all his life and work, such as the library's primacy over other rooms, the fortified tower, and the alchemist's gold. A private home. Quote, on December 1900, I took up my post as assistant at Burghölzli Mental Hospital Zurich. I was glad to be in Zurich, for in the course of the years Basel had become too stuffy for me. In Basel I was stamped for all times as son of the Reverend Paul Jung and the grandson of Professor Carl Gustav Jung. End quote. This is the Burghölzli. After he had finished his studies of medicine, C.G. Jung became an ambitious young physician and psychiatrist. He was the first to apply the new theories of Sigmund Freud in a mental hospital. Beyond that, he evolved his own research. In 1903, C.G. Jung married Emma Rauschenbach. Emma's father was a successful industrialist from Schaffhausen, where he produced on a grand scale architectural machines and in addition watches. The mother originated from Laufen, that's on the Rheinfall, and she had at one time taken care of little Karl. After their marriage, Emma and Karl lived for a few years in an official apartment at the Burghölzli Clinic. Father Rauschenbach died at an early age, and Emma consequently inherited a fortune. So Emma and Karl thought about changing their housing conditions and settling down. 5 miles out of Zurich, the borough of Küsnacht offered 5,000 square meters of building land right by the Lake Zurich. It was the orchard of a big farm which was used as a poorhouse. In 1907, the contract was signed. So the dream of little Karl came true. You recognize the lakeside with the village of Küsnacht and in the distance the range of the Alps. Quote, we have in mind to build a house someday in the country near Zurich. The house would come to stand on a bright location on the lake. You can get an approximate idea of the external character from my ever so imperfect sketch, what you see. The small yard along the lake is surrounded by a wall. The veranda, complete with pavilion, is white and to be done in Rococo. End quote. Jung made a first draft of the proposed house and sent it to Ernst Viechter, his cousin. Viechter worked as architect in Munich, Germany, where he was teaching at the Technical University. But Jung was cautious. Quote, I thoroughly took care that my cousin did not bring in the ideas of the Art Nouveau. At that time, the messing up of the style had just started. Unquote. Viechter transformed Jung's draft rather mechanically into an architectural perspective. Also, he marked the plan with the notation variant. And he drew up a second plan with less historical details and more in a contemporary style. Quote, CG speaking. Many thanks for the beautiful plans. The first version in pure Zurich style is the one that pleases me the most. Nevertheless, the roof turret should be dispensed with. And I would like a more Baroque or more Rococo form for the pavilion. Otherwise, I very much approve of the exterior." End quote. The cousin's trick worked. Jung liked the moderate draft proposal with the rather rural house. Emma presumably seconded this point of view, and so it was to be carried out. Quote, "The house was built in the early Baroque style, which is to be found commonly on the shore of the Lake Zurich. In Basel, I would have built it in the 18th century style." End quote. The residential home by the lake looks as if it had always been there. It represents the type of a traditional Lake Zurich house. It shows a rectangular building of 2 floors and a saddle roof with a transverse gable facing the lake. Let's see the patterns of the building. The adjoining building was the poor house of Küsnacht. With ease you will recognize the same type of building, only with a different orientation, as the gable faces the lake. In the back at left you may see the Jung house. The poor house was demolished in 1929 when a public beach was opened up in its place. On the other side of Jung's estate, you find the house Zur Gerbe, which means tannery. Until about 1950, when it was transformed into a residential dwelling, it was a farmhouse. Again, the local type of building is obvious. Quote, "Rough ashlar below, plasterwork and daub above. It is to have stepped gables with small steps. Rheinau. All windows at the raised ground floor are to have grates. The loci are all to be placed in the turret." End quote. The first draft showed the appearance of the house towards the lake, the one you have seen already. Here you see the second tentative pencil draft made by Jung. That is how he imagined his house to be, facing the road. A castle-like building with a distinctive tower. Rheinau. The reference in the above quotation leads us to an ancient abbey north of Zurich. A mental hospital was established in there, which Jung knew very well. In the town nearby, one finds several great houses of church dignitaries, such as the house von Waldkirch, with stepped gables and a round tower. Could it have been a prototype for the Jung house? Ernst Viechter carried out Jung's ideas, but also moderated their romantic historicism. He assembled technical and artistic demands along with elements of the early country style. The prominent tower with its decorated portal expresses a manorial character, a very different type of building compared with the neighborhood. It represents the type of a pleasure seat, as the noble country houses on the lakefront had been called at that time. Anyhow, Jung's attempt to create a kind of housing for his personality number 2 failed. In 1909, the family Jung moved into the house, in Küsnacht. It was the family home where the 5 children grew up. Emma and Karl lived here for the main parts of their lives. Family members inhabit the house until today. Here you see the young family in 1917. At left, CG with Franz, sitting Emma and little Marianne, behind them Agathe, to the right, great. Missing in the picture is the youngest daughter Helene, who today still lives in Küsnacht. The most spacious accommodation in the house is, according to the building plan, the dining room. This is no surprise, since an exquisite cuisine was of great importance. So the dining table was placed in the middle of the room. The space left along the walls was used as a sitting area. A cook, a chambermaid, a nurse, and a gardener, who also served as a driver, were in charge of the well-being of the family. There is another ample room in the house, the library. This was Jung's personal realm. Here he assembled his collection of important books of poetry, philosophy, history, natural science, humanities, and alchemy. This was his primary source of all available knowledge. In the library, he received visitors and patients and worked with his secretary. Built in is a separate room, the study, reserved for his scientific work and for his private imaginations. Quote, "It was during Advent of the year 1913, December 12th to be exact. I was sitting at my desk once more, thinking over my fears. Then I let myself drop. Suddenly, it was as though the ground literally gave way beneath my feet, and I plunged down into the dark depths. I could not fend off a feeling of panic." End quote. In the study, Jung started a self-experiment, submerging himself into his fantasies, in a way of daydreaming today known as active imagination. Quote, "When I was working on the fantasies, I needed a point of support. It was most essential for me to have a normal life in the real world, as a counterpoise to that strange inner world. The knowledge, I have a medical diploma. I must help my patients. I have a wife and 5 children. I live at 228 Seestrasse in Küsnacht. These were actualities which made demands upon me and proved to me that I really existed." Quote, "An incessant stream of fantasies had been released. I stood helpless before an alien world. Everything in it seemed difficult and incomprehensible. I wrote these fantasies down in the Red Book, which I embellished with drawings. I had to draw concrete conclusions from the insights the unconscious had given me, and that task was to become a life work." End quote. After being hidden for many years in a bank safe, the Red Book was published in 2009. In a kind of fast motion, we go now through the Red Book, picking out the relevant imagery concerning buildings. Quote, "This is the caster of holy water. The kabiri grow out of the flowers which spring from the body of the dragon. Above is the temple." End quote. The dragon has been killed. A work has been done. The youth casts with a jug the sprouting roses. On them grow kabiri, helpful dwarfs. On a cloud appears the temple as a hope for the completion of the personality in the self. Quote, "A town is stretching along the edge of the sea, an ordinary modern port with smoking factory chimneys. Above lay a thick bank of cloud, and above this there rolled a shining disk, divided into quadrants by a cross. Here we have two worlds separated by a bank of cloud and no touching." End quote. Over an old town with a port and factory lies a dense cloud cover. The same youth is sitting above, carrying on his head the jug, from which ascends an immense disk with a blazing corona, the sign of the self, the totality of the personality, though the realms above and below the cloud are disconnected. Quote, "Suddenly there appeared from right a winged being sailing across the sky. I saw that it was an old man. He had wings of a kingfisher with its characteristic colors. I called him Philemon." End quote. Out of the helpful dwarfs developed Philemon. He comes to land with a light in his hands on the cupola of the temple whose principle he is. The temple stands now on earth, though in the wilderness, where the snake guards the treasure. Remarkable is the figure of the old man with his wings, which forms a cross and therefore the basic shape of a mandala. Philemon became for Jung an important inner figure, which finally led him to the discovery of autonomous psychic factors. Quote, "A mandala as a fortified city with walls and moat. Within a broad moat surrounding a wall fortified with 16 towers and with another inner moat. This moat encloses a central castle with golden roofs, whose center is a golden temple. Through this dream, I understood that the self is the principle and archetype of orientation and meaning. Therein lies its healing function." End quote. Jung recorded the essence of an impressive dream in a mandala. Now, the temple is part of the central castle and of the surrounding town. The golden castle, like the temple or the treasure house, a symbol of the self. The golden temple is round and stays next to the water. Quote, "Words and paper did not seem real enough to me. I had to make a confession of faith in stone. That was the beginning of the tower, the house which I built for myself at Bollingen. At first I did not plan a proper house, but merely a kind of primitive one-story dwelling. It was to be a round structure with a hearth in the center and bunks along the walls." End quote. In 1923, Jung realized that despite having a residence in Küsnacht, he was missing something, namely a dwelling place for his personality number 2. In the loneliness of the upper Lake Zurich, he bought some formerly monastic land in Bollingen and built there an archaic tower, at first with his own hands. Quote, when Faust, in his hubris and self-inflation, caused the murder of Philemon and Baucis, I felt guilty, quite as if I myself in the past had helped commit the murder of the 2 old people. I regarded it as my responsibility to atone for this crime, or to prevent its repetition. Unquote. Philemonis Sacrum Fausti Penitentia, the shrine of Philemon, Faust's expiation. This is the motto on the tower. It refers to the drama Faust by Wolfgang Goethe. And this is a story, out of greed, Dr. Faust had burned down the hut of Philemon and Baucis, and the old couple died in the fire. With the construction of his tower, Jung thought to atone for the outrage and restore the hut of Philemon, which was also a temple. Quote, I altered the plan even during the first stages of building, for I felt it was too primitive. I realized it would have to be a regular 2-story house, not a mere hut crouched on the ground. So in 1923, the first round house was built, and when it was finished, I saw that it had become a suitable dwelling tower. I have done without electricity and tend the fireplace and the stove myself. Evenings, I light the old lamps. There is no running water, and I pump the water from the well. I chop the wood and I cook the food. These simple acts make man simple. And how difficult is it to be simple? Unquote. On the ground floor in the tower there is only one room, the kitchen, and on top of a narrow stair 3 tiny bedrooms are added. The meals are cooked over a fire, the water has to be pumped, and the light comes from oil lamps. A modest place to withdraw. Jung soon felt that his tower was incomplete and added a hall. In contrast to his house in Küsnacht, where he placed the tower in front of the house, he now enlarged the tower with a house to live in. But this was again not the final form for his refuge. Step by step, he added another tower to create a place of spiritual concentration and an enclosed court toward the lake. Quote, I suddenly realized that the small central section which crouched so low, so hidden, was myself. I could no longer hide myself behind the maternal and the spiritual towers. So I added an upper story to this section, which represents myself, or my ego personality. I built the house in sections, always following the concrete needs of the moment. It might also be said that I built it in a kind of dream. Only afterward I see how all the parts fitted together. and that a meaningful form had resulted, a symbol of psychic wholeness. Without my earth, my work would not have been possible. Unquote. To be capable of carrying out his scientific work, C.G. Jung needed the simple life and timelessness of his tower. I return once more to the Red Book. Its basic report was written at the beginning of the First World War. The book itself was created between 1913 and 1928. The tower started in 1923, so there was only a relatively short time of overlapping. But one gets the impression that the tower was in a miraculous provision for noun. Quote, I come to quiet, dark swamp water, and a small old castle stands at its center. I knock on the door, and I'm let in. The dim light of an antiquated lamp lights the room only very meagerly. It's a scholar's study with a large white writing desk at which an old man sits wearing a long black robe. He has that modest, fearful look of scholarly men who have long since been squashed to nothing by the abundance of knowledge. End quote. Text and picture of 1913 remind us in a strange way of Jung himself and the tower he will be going to build much later on. But let us also keep an eye on the different characters we do encounter here. Quote, I find that I'm standing on the highest tower of a castle. I'm wearing a green garment. I'm the tower guard. I look out into the distance. I see a red point out there. It comes near on a winding road. It is a horseman in a red coat. He's already riding through the gate. He knocks. A strange fear comes over me. There stands the Red One, his long shape wholly shrouded in red. Even his hair is red. I think, in the end, he will turn out to be the devil. Unquote. In the first chapter of Liber Secundus, Jung encounters the Red One, the devil, who even enters the castle, and this marks the beginning of a close relationship. Quote, after a long search, I found the small house in the country, fronted by a large bed of tulips. This is where Philemon the magician lives with his wife Baucis. At times, he seemed to me quite real, as if he were a living personality. I went walking up and down the garden with him, and to me he was what the Indians call a guru. Unquote. In the last chapter of the Liber Secundus, we meet Philemon. He's the wise old man, also a trickster, and will be the spiritual master of C.G. Jung. And so he will be also the master of the tower in Bollingen. Quote, it was noon on a hot summer's day. I met Philemon strolling in the fragrant grass. A blue shade came from the other side, and Philemon said, welcome to the garden, my master, my beloved, my brother. The shade replied, is this garden not mine? Philemon said, you are or master here in the world of man. Men have changed. They grant hospitality to the gods. The terrible worm came before you, whom you recognize as your brother. I know only one thing, that whoever hosts I know only one thing, that whoever hosts the worm also needs its brother. End quote. This occurrence happens at the very end of the Red Book. In the basic report, the shade is identified as Christ, whereas the worm stands for Satan. The picture, which does not belong to the Red Book, shows Phanes, the Shining One, the first of the gods and the father of Eros, in a bluish aureole.
It's very Gnostic.
Quote, the Systema Mundi Totius portrays the antinomies of the microcosm within the macrocosmic world. At the very top, the figure of the young boy in the winged egg, called Phanes, as a spiritual figure. His stark antithesis in the depths is here designated as Abraxas, the lord of the physical world. If I am not conjoined through the uniting of the below and the above, I break down into three parts: the serpent, arousing fear and longing, the human soul living forever with you, and the celestial soul dwelling with the gods. End quote. We notice that the characters which Jung encounters in his fantasies represent powerful figures in the cosmology of man. Concerning them, it is important to correlate and to balance. It is the stone staying in Bollingen. Quote, it was one of many cut stones that had come from the quarry across the lake. It struck my fancy, and I leaped upon it with the decision to carve its surface. The stone stands outside the tower and is like an explanation of it. It is a manifestation of the occupant, but one which remains incomprehensible to others. All the volumes I had written are in Nuke contained in it. End quote. At the end of his life, C.G. Jung created a spiritual legacy, carving on the face of a big stone cube his whole cognition. He created a marvelous mandala which encloses all the known and unknown. Quote, on the face of the stone is a large circle within a square. Inside this circle is a much smaller circle, like the hub of a wheel, and within the hub stands a figure. On its body is the sign of the planet Mercury. In his left hand is a lantern, and the right hand seems to be pointing. From the inner circle radiate outward 4 diagonal lines, 3 of them zigzag and 1 undulating like a river or a serpent, dividing the wheel into 4 parts. To the left is the sun, to the right the moon. End quote. The mandala might be rebuilt in many various modes. It is, of course, an evolved version of the Systema Mundi Totius. But in the center is no longer Anthropos, that is man, but Telesphoros, the bringer of light, and therefore connected with the divine child. The sign on his body names him as Mercury. Mercury, or Greek Hermes, is the messenger of the gods, leading us on our path through the dark, but is also a trickster, a big innovator who confronts us always with the unexpected. But the mandala can also be read as an allegory of the nearby tower with its landlord Philemon. As the stone says, I'm youth and old man at one and the same time. In the picture from the Red Book, we have seen Philemon with a light in his hands and a serpent to his feet. Quite similar as we have here. The figure looks like he's staying in the door of his house, which contains 4 compartments. Thus, it reminds us of the tower, which is round and contains 4 compartments as well. There are also 3 stairs leading to 4 different stories, as we have in the tower, and we had in Jung's dream of his house in 1907. The house is connected also with water, which meanders from the door to the outer world. Now, there is one remark I like to add. When I was asked to join this seminar, I felt insecure. To speak to an invisible public seemed strange to me. So I inquired of the I Ching, the old Chinese oracle, which C.G. Jung used to consult. Quote, 20, Quan, contemplation, view. The hexagram can be understood as picturing a type of tower characteristic of ancient China. A tower of this kind commanded a wide view over the country. At the same time, when situated on a mountain, it became a landmark that could be seen for miles around. Thus, the hexagram shows a ruler who, by means of a good government, sets a lofty example to the masses. Unquote. And here I am, and I have finished. Thank you.
So we are all very grateful to Andreas for this wonderful slideshow and presentation. I suggest we take a 15-minute break now, 10-15 minutes, and then come back and have discussion. Bring your questions. I'm sure Andreas will be happy to respond, as will I. So we'll see you in 15 minutes, okay?
Yeah, sounds good. 15 minutes. We'll reconvene. Thank you both. And Murray and Andreas, I just need to tell you that I was flooded by comments, as I was trying to leave to take care of various things, and I can't tell you how many people have just absolutely flocked around me and said what a marvelous job that both of you have done. And Andreas, your English has nothing to fear whatsoever. You're fabulous in your English. I know reading's different from speaking, but you did very, very well, and the images were moving. All the comments have been, we have experienced a sacred happening together. You very humbly and gently put up these images to us to look at, and everybody just felt very, very moved by them. So I really can't thank you enough. You have done a marvelous, marvelous presentation.
Thank you.
Another round of applause. Murray, do we want to go right to questions, or what's your thought right now?
Well, we just have a couple of introductory things, and then we can go to questions.
Okay.
I wanted to let the audience know, as I'm sure many of you do, that a lot of these pictures that Andreas showed are, I've seen them for the first time. They're not available publicly. I don't think they've ever been published. So my question to Andreas is, where are these pictures housed, and where do you get them from?
From all over. Yes. You pointed already out of this picture of this book, and part of it are already published in this book, but the others I have from all over. So some of them, of course, are out of the Red Book and the printed copy.
Yes.
Of course.
And
some of them are even out of the internet. Yes. Well, to find a picture for the I Ching, for instance, that was difficult to find. So,
but these sketches of the tower and the house, some of them are published in this book.
Yes, they are published in here, and so I have an archive with pictures like that, and and I'm glad to show them. Yes.
So if you want to see those pictures, the book is available. Okay. Now, Andreas mentioned that the largest room in the house on Seestrasse is the dining room, but then another large room is the library. And I would like him to maybe say just a few words about the library, about Jung's collection of works, and what has happened to it, and what is its status today, and what are you doing with that library?
Well, it was always difficult what should happen with the house when my grandfather died. So it was questioned, and so my father could overtake it. And when my father died, so we could overtake it, but it's very difficult nowadays because it's a large house and with many things in it. So now it's owned by a foundation, but we still live in. So we gave it on this condition to live in until we move out in this way or another way, and so somehow we are in the same time. Of course, we live there and have somehow a splendid life. But on the other hand, we are like custodians
of the house,
and have to open doors and answer questions and the library is somehow like a museum. It's not a museum, so it's not. This house is not open really to the public, but we show it to if people come and ask. So we try to show it to make it possible that they could come in for just to have a look. But others, they want to search in it and
do research in the library.
Yes. And of course, the books are old books. That means that it's not a new stand, an actual stand, an actual level of the knowledge, but so people are mostly coming to see how Jung used the books. If he noted something in it, if there are notes or inscriptions or just marking it, so that one can see in which way it was used. And this is. I have to deal with different foundations. That means the house is owned by one foundation and the books are owned by the other foundation. And that's the foundation of the works of C.G. Jung, which formerly was the heirs of C.G. Jung. And so we have to cope with each other. And but now that the Red Book sells so fantastically, it is astonishing. And so we are working really with the books. That means the books are, one looks at them, so people, Fachleute, how do you call it?
Experts,
yes. So they look at it, what should be done with those books. and some of them they have damages, but this is not that so bad. But one thing is, of course, the Säurefraß, the acid.
Acidity.
Yes, acidity somehow. So since from 1850 about, the paper, the quality of the paper has changed, and so since then the paper is falling to pieces if one does not do anything against it, and so we are.
You're working on
Yes, so the
preserving-
books are
preserving
going
the library.
to a kind of firm, to kind of factory, if you want, which is owned by Switzerland, by the state, and to preserve them.
Preserve them.
Yes.
And the idea is that the library will stay intact and in the house.
Of course, that was always so. The house was always inhabited by the family, but when my father moved in, we moved in as children, if you want, and the library was always somehow like it remained, more or less like it how it was. So it's still the same. Not everything, but most of the things. And the book are still on their same places. So it's.
So questions. Why don't we open up now for questions and comments? Steve, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. And what a neat, another jewel. I didn't realize that you had that going on at AJC. That is fabulous. I do want to mention one thing along those lines, that Andreas Jung has very graciously shown a number of wonderful images. We had to get special copyright permission to use those images for today's seminar. So even though we broadcast them on a video stream, it's important that our viewers not take that as license to use these images for whatever that they want. These images are still personal, private foundations. Their copyright is not even Andreas Jung. There's other folks that have copyrights with them. So please respect the copyright permissions and don't use these images outside of this seminar per se. But with that said, yes, let's go on for questions. I have an email question. Actually, it's a comment, and then I've got some other questions. We'll ask Asheville in a moment for questions, so Asheville will be thinking about it. We'll go to Sonoma then. First, I've got one comment that I want to read because it's very touching. Let me read this to you if I can click on it. This is from Tehran. So this is Iran. This is from Tehran in Iran. And I'm not going to read the name of the person because I'm not sure it would be wise to reveal his name. But he says, this is just to convey our thanks to the organizers and presenters of this seminar. Our word of support comes to you all from Iran. We know that we will not be able to hear or see the seminar without interruptions. Nevertheless, we are with you. Now, how moving. Isn't that just a beautiful piece?
Thank you.
From Iran. So Asheville, question or two from Asheville. Any people here with a question? Yes, please, go ahead.
During the presentation, I couldn't help but notice that some of the images were
Could you hear the question? Did the audio come
No,
across?
we cannot hear the question, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. The question was about tarot, the tarot cards and images. Many of the pictures seemed very reminiscent of tarot cards or spirituality, and was wondering if you had any comments on that.
Do you? The tarot?
Tarot or tarot?
The images
meant-
in the red book are somewhat similar to the tarot, some of the tarot pictures.
Well, I can't answer the question, but the only thing is that now that the Red Book is published, we are very good guided with the comments of Sonu Shamdasani what concerns the words, but we have no knowledge of the pictures. So I did not found until now any picture which would remind you would think, because I have quite Jung, he assembled, he was collecting some pictures, but
Yeah.
I never found any
Correspondence
with them. And I asked, I told Sonu Shamdasani that he should do another work and to really find the Vorbilder.
Yeah, on the ARAS website, Tom Singer will be able to confirm this and maybe say a little more about it. There is an essay posted on there by Jay Sherry. And Jay Sherry has done some of this kind of work to find images that resemble images in the Red Book, and they're quite striking. For instance, the one that looks Mayan, the picture that looks Mayan, he found an actual Mayan, a photograph of a Mayan creation, art object that resembles it very closely. Whether Jung had a copy of that or saw it, or this is just a coincidence, but that's the only thing I know of that essay by Jay Sherry that does some of this kind of work of pointing out some similarities. With Salome, for instance, he does quite a bit, shows some pictures of Salome as they were in the public view in the teens of the 20th century. Figure of Salome, because of Strauss's opera Salome, was a very popular figure at the time, femme fatale, very wicked female figure, and scantily dressed, and many pictures and photographs of the actresses who played that role in Paris and so on. And so I think he shows a couple of those. Tom, do you have anything further to say about that essay? Do you know about it?
Yes, I do. And I can actually tell people where to find it. It's if you went onto the eris.org site, on the home page there's a spot where you can click on a free subscription to so-called Eris Connections. And in the 2010 issue number 1, which was just a year ago, there are 2 essays, one by Paul Bruche on Carl Jung and his relationship to art and beauty, and the second one is by Jay Sherry. And Jay's article is lovely because it's the first essay that tries to put the images in the Red Book in a cultural context. He's not interpreting the images. He's not interpreting them in terms of symbolic meaning, but he is framing them in terms of the cultural context. What was happening in the world of art at the time that Jung was doing these drawings? And so it's a lovely introduction to the culture of that time. That's the value, I think, of Jay's article.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Well, how about Tom, since you're on screen? Any questions over from Sonoma? And then I've got an email question or two I might ask.
I'll start with one. We have a few, and my question has to do with Andreas Jung's book, and the question is, did his book come out before the Red Book was published? Because this wonderful integration of images from the Red Book and the architecture, it struck me that maybe what we were seeing this morning was brand new, and I'm wondering if that's something he does in his book, or whether the publication of the book preceded the publication of the Red Book.
Well, did this one the first?
Yeah, this came first. but you're weaving together portions of this with the Red Book. That's your own recent work now.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
yes,
not
yes.
in this book.
Yes, no, this is not, the Red Book is not, well, it's mentioned, but it's not in that book. When I said, and now I'm coming back to the Red Book, this was new, this is not in that book. So what I did before, just I showed the buildings, well, the temple in the Red Book, but not the figures. So the encounters, that was that I haven't done before.
Do you want to say something about this book, when it was published, what's in it?
Well, so this book, of course, it was our foundation made it, and when we restored the house, and so this was, and just 100 years after its when it was built. It was built in 1989, and so, and we restored it just 100 years later. And it contains, well, the story of the house. It contains the restoration now, the recent restoration. It shows you the old and the modern house. So it's not really, it's only a part of it, this rather historical, symbolic relation, but the rest is architectural work and to the relation, familiar relations are in here, so you find quite a spectrum.
A spectrum, yeah.
A spectrum of what is connected with this house in Küsnacht.
And is there anything about Bollingen, the Tower of Bollingen in this book, Andreas?
Yes, but a little bit, because Bollingen is just it is set in this second possibility, a second trial to build something for his personality number 2. This is in it, but not that much. But somehow the same. It's somehow the same what we have seen already.
Yeah.
Yes, this is in the book.
Is
Yes.
there a plan to do a book on the Tower at Bollingen?
No, I don't think so. In the moment, not, because bowling, this is difficult since, of course, if you would show bowling, open it to the public, it wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible. Someday it must be possible, but I would not know how to do it because the stairs are that big, and it's so you have to,
small,
and
yeah.
it's very dangerous. Even to, I'm wondering that my grandfather did it because there are no, you can't.
No rails, nothing to
No,
hold on
nothing,
to.
nothing. You have just the steps are that big, and so to go there with foreign people, with.
And in the dark. And
Yes, yes. So, and I think it's really a problem because one day one should show it, but then you had to transform it. I think you had to,
yeah,
you had to let because yes. So, and this is a third foundation anyhow. Yes, so each one, because they were separated, I have no really connection to each other, so you have to deal with them, yes. Yes.
Well, people come to Zurich from far and wide, and they want to visit your house.
Yes.
They want to visit Bollingen, and it's always very difficult. What should one say to them, or how could they go about in a decent civil way asking for permission to see some of these sites? Is it possible?
Well, so we try to show. I can speak only for our house that we are living in. So this is the house in Küsnacht, and of course, if it's that for, I shouldn't speak to such an audience, of course.
Yeah, I guess.
So please do not listen. Yes. Yes, and because if you live in such a house, you can show it to a certain amount of people, and
Exactly,
if it's
yeah.
too much, it's not.
But generally, people come through like the Jung Institute or ISAP, and they'll come in small groups by invitation or by special.
Well, we have all kinds.
Yeah.
We have people knocking at the door. We have people walking through the garden. We have people ringing or
pictures,
belling
yeah.
or whatever. And of course, what we try to show it to institutions. So if I think some of you have been here already at our house, and so if a school or students, a group of students, if they want to come, so of course they have to write first through email or through
They
or
come
phone
with,
or
with
any,
somebody with a guide.
and so it has
or
to be
something.
arranged.
Yeah.
And
So it's
but
too
even-
much to have individuals.
Yes, but even so, I don't take more than 10 persons in one go to the library,
Yeah.
and so it shows that you can do it 3 times, but then it's finished. Yes.
Many people are fascinated by what's above the doorway, you know, that vocatus atque non vocatus. You didn't mention that in your talk. Was that, when did that occur to Jung to put that up there? Was that right from the beginning?
Oh, yes, of course. Vocatus atque non vocatus. But you know it.
Well, I want you to say it.
Yes, because Mary Stein, he asked me to come to San Francisco, and there it was a theme, because there I noticed that it was religion, the theme, and I didn't know it before, and so I had to connect it with this. So it's on the door, it's a Delphic oracle saying, if you ask him or not, God will be present, will be in business. And of course, it's a motto for Jung, and you find it all over. So I found it very interesting to go through the Red Book and to find that this was really somehow the look at the.
It's in the Red Book also, yeah.
Yes, because it's always the same question. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got an internet question if I could ask, and then we can look at some of the other sites as well. This question is actually a compilation of a few questions that we've received, and I thought I would pass this along. If it doesn't feel right to answer, it's fine to pass, but I'm going to gently put it out there. The summary of the questions would be, many of us idealize, probably over-idealize your grandfather, put him on a pedestal, see him in this tremendous light. It strikes us that your view of him obviously is very different. It's a very special, personal view. I'm wondering if you could at all share with us any experience of your grandfather, anything that would put him in a personal kind of human light, and any thoughts with that. And if you care not to, that's fine as well.
Well, I think what Murray said about his father, it's all over the same. That of course, but one thing, Jung. If I'm speaking in this public, I say Jung. I don't say my grandfather. It's Jung. So he, of course, he was straight. So he would tell you what he thought, and if you liked it or not. And so. Yes, and so I feared him rather for a long time. I was a little afraid of him because I did not like to, because I was the one to tell. I was somehow the same, but I didn't like it to have it, to hear it from someone else. So I was rather going a little bit apart, and so it was, and for that I'm very.
You tell a story in the book. I think you wouldn't mind repeating that since it's already published. A moment, a little snapshot with your grandfather.
Yes, well, this is really, I wrote it in that book because it was the beginning of everything. So that means when I was a schoolboy, and I was I was a little boy, and I was in the house and was waiting for my grandparents. And the grandparents, they came from the upper story down into the hall, the entrance hall. And I was staying there and waiting. And coming down, the grandparents, they were speaking together, and they said, well, it's a burden to have such a big house, and there's always something to do, and yes. And so I listened to that, and when they came down, I told them, now listen, if really one day you don't need any longer this house, well, I will take it. I will.
Now you have it.
And yes, and then when it was questioned, because it was, you can imagine, it was very difficult when we had to, when we were heirs again, when my father died, because for him too it was very difficult to keep all that together. And so we thought, what shall we do with that house? We can't do it any longer. And so then I said, now listen to myself. I said, listen, what did you tell? You said you will take it over, so now do it. And I did it, and it was for some time it was very hard, of course, having a beautiful villa, but no, it was hard because yes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then it was possible to found this foundation, and so now I think it's really we found a good way.
That's a very good way. And what is the plan for the house after you and your wife no longer are in the house? What is there some concept of what will become of the house or how it will be used?
Well, I can, of course, now it's a foundation, and I'm a member of this foundation, but I'm not the foundation, so I can't say what they are thinking. But what my aim would be to keep it as a museum, because it is really this. I was touched because there was once someone ringing the bell, and I opened the door, and it was a man, a friendly man, and he said, "Oh, can I visit this house?" And I said, "You will. You know, it's a private home." And he said, "Yes, but you know, there's nowhere in the world as a museum or anything you can come near to C.G. Jung. So it's really a pity." and so I think I would like to have it as a museum, basically, because I think we have furniture, we have the books, we have quite a lot, not everything, of course, but many things have gone, but
Yeah.
quite a lot is still here. And so I think really that would be,
So,
and
yeah,
might be, and a place for science, so a documentary place, so you can, that's
Yeah,
the other.
to
so
do
the
some
two-
research,
yes,
maybe to have
yes,
seminars along the lines of the Freud Museum in London, maybe. I mean, I don't know how many of you have visited that, but it's a very impressive place. You go in there, there's Freud's study, exactly the way it was set up when he moved to London, 1938, and then other parts of the house where you can buy some books or objects, and occasionally they have conferences there and something along those lines. Yeah, that would be very nice, I think.
Of course, it's a way.
Eventually, yeah. You know, Steve, we also have an audience here in Zurich. Would it be okay if we opened it up for them to make a comment or ask a
I
question?
keep forgetting that because we're not used to that model. But yes, let's take some Zurich questions.
Is there anybody here who would like to say something, make a comment, or ask a question? To my left here is one of the students from ISEP, Laura, who's the chair or the head president of the Student Association, and she's American. Would you like to just say a word? And
Oh, well.
I put you on the spot.
I am on the spot, my goodness. Greetings. Yes, this is a new technology to me, too. I did have a question, comment. It's a little bit hard to articulate, but you had mentioned that Jung suggested that there was a unity between psyche and matter early on, and I think the Eastern sciences have recognized that for a long time, and the Western sciences now are really backing that up, but I still see a lot of split between psyche and matter in the Western world, and in a sense in how we practice. And I'm wondering if either of you have any thoughts about how we can grow in our community along those lines.
Yes, well, I thought as a subtitle for our seminar today, interconnections between spirit and matter, and I think that you're picking up on that, Laura, because what we want to show in these seminars is the ways in which Jung was looking for overcoming the splits that we live with, whether they are the splits between good and evil, or male and female, masculine, feminine, or psyche and matter. And gradually and step by step, in his theorizing, and certainly in his living, he, I think, suggested ways that these could be overcome. Now, that's going to be a long road to walk down, and I know that you're very interested in Chinese philosophy and Chinese medicine, which is more integrated, let's say, doesn't split mind and body as rigidly as Western science does, but somehow maybe, Western science and Eastern philosophy and methods could find a modus vivendi. I think Jung probably provides some of the theoretical basis for thinking about that. The practice is much more difficult, and, but it's a work in progress. Do you have any thoughts about that, Andreas, at all? You're not in this profession, so it's another field.
Yes.
But I think in your talk you very nicely wove together the architectural features, what Jung did in stone and concrete, with his imagery, and so that's also a way of overcoming inner and outer. To live in a house in an architectural space that's meaningful to you, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. So, but it has to be connected, because if I'm going out of the building level, so it's I can't hold it. I can't.
it's a different,
I feel insecure, and so I don't.
Yeah,
It's not my.
not your thing. Yeah.
I have a question from Sonoma. Are we on?
Yep, you're on.
Please, go ahead.
Andreas, I thought you gave a beautiful talk, and I love looking at the images and hearing your words. I wondered if we could go back to one of the images, the one that was not in the red book, toward the end of your talk, the one with the worm,
Aber
and the
jetzt
shade,
sehe ich das.
and the
Ah,
crust.
doch, doch,
The
doch.
funnies.
Just
The
to look
funnies
at it and maybe
that
to hear
it's not in the red
where
book.
it came from.
Which one? Das
The
ist
funnies
das da.
toward the end. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, where is that located at?
If you come to Zurich and go in the Riedberg Museum, where is the Red Book now is exhibited in the Riedberg Museum, and there you will find this picture. It's a separate picture, and of course I don't know what it is like. So as many of the pictures we have in the Red Book, we don't know. We have to look at it and to look what it might mean. And of course, it's somehow the same constellation, and as in the Systema Unitotius, so with the Farnese on the top,
Yeah.
but at the bottom, and one has one thinks that it might be Philemon, but
Yeah.
might be not. But anyhow, it's but
Is this from a private collection? Somebody has this?
yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Yeah. But Jung did not transfer this, because when he was painting in the Red Book, he would sometimes do sketches, right? And then put it in the Red Book in a complete form, finished
But
form.
we haven't seen that. We haven't found that.
Oh, I
We
see.
did not find. We have no sketches for them.
Oh,
No,
so
no,
he
no.
painted right in the book.
Well, might be, or might be he throw away all the sketches.
throw away
But we
the
have
sketches,
we
yeah.
didn't find any sketches
I
because
see.
otherwise they would be in the Red Book.
Uh-huh.
Because what we have the sketches of the mandalas. Those some of them are in the Red Book,
Yeah.
but and all together are in the Riedberg Museum. But we have no other sketches for the Red Book.
Oh,
Yes.
so you don't know
So
if this was
Andre-
a sketch or?
No, but as you will see in the exhibition, there are several pictures which are not. They are different. They are not the same as in the Red Book, and you will see the same. Please go ahead.
Andreas, some of us may never see this picture again, so I wondered if we could look at it again, and as an art historian, could you just describe the figures? It's hard to see some of the details. For example, is that a fish there? Maybe just to walk through the image and just to say what you're seeing. Some of the detail is hard for us to see. If you could.
So you see, I think there must be priests somehow with different signs.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's, but I don't know. I see as much as you see because I don't know what it is like. I only can guess, as you can too.
It looks like a kind of worshiping figure there on the left. kneeling, maybe holding a chalice or something.
Also the showers. The mandala when I had left. And this was
Holding up, but the one who's kneeling down. Holding something
yes,
in the
yes,
hand,
yes.
you see, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
yes.
And this could be Philemon on the right, holding
Yes, might be.
whatever
yes.
that is he's holding up there.
So I'm sorry.
How big is this picture in reality?
It's like this.
It's not a big picture, it's only this size, you see.
It's okay, it's good
It's
just
rather
to
small.
look at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
If there's a postcard, we'll send one.
Yeah.
Now, Andreas is referring to an exhibition here in Zurich that is going on right now until March 20th. If any of you can come over, it's at one of the most distinguished museums in Zurich called the Rietberg, Rietberg. Probably you could go online and also get some information. There's a whole hall, quite a large hall in the museum dedicated to an exhibition of the Red Book and associated materials. And this painting is on a wall in that exhibition room. Also on the walls and in cases are other things like the black books, the notebooks that Jung made the initial entries in. The Systema Mundatotius, the original, is on a wall. There are wood carvings that come out of private collections that nobody has ever seen before. It's really a very, very interesting showing of Jung's artistic endeavors and creativity.
And where in Zurich is that?
It's at the Rietberg Museum, Rietberg, Rietberg. They have a website. You could go and take a look there too.
We've got about 10 minutes left. I thought maybe we could do one more question from Asheville, maybe another one from Sonoma, and then we'll probably be about ready to wrap up. Are there any Asheville questions? Anybody here in the room would like to ask a question? May not be any in that space, but any questions? Okay, so none from Asheville. Any Sonoma? And then I'll look for an email question too while Sonoma is answering. Sonoma, do you have any other questions?
There's a question, yes. Well, we have a written one. Looking at the house as one would a dream image, the dining room is the most spacious. Jung's work focuses on digestion with the ample room, the library. The intellectual focus is secondary. The large towers are spirituality. So I think the question has to do with the different rooms as sort of functions of the psyche in a way, that the large room would be about taking things in, not with the mind, but with a deeper part of the self in a way, and that the library was the place of logos and that the towers were a place of spirituality. I think it's an attempt to understand the structure of the house in a psychological way.
Do you want to say something about the dining room? What did Jung think about it, and how was it used?
Well, as I said, the dining room, if I show it to people, I say this is the stomach, and the other is the head, of course, the library. And I think for Jung it was very important not only to think, but to do all the other things. Therefore he was working on different materials, but he was also cooking. So in Bollingen, he would not let someone else do the cooking. He let people wash the dishes. That he would do. But the cooking he did himself, and he was a beautiful cook. And poor cook who did a nasty meal. He could be so angry, and he says such a good stuff and such a nasty meal you made. So he would be very angry with them. So this would be kind of shadow if you want. Yes.
I think, Jung managed in his lifetime to offend many, many people. Andreas has said that he was very direct and without sort of, all the diplomatic niceties that we're all accustomed to nowadays in professional dialogue. Jung was very direct. I've thought that actually he had something that one could call an offensive personality disorder. Because he offended so many people in so many different ways. But the dining room is also, in addition to place eating, of course, it's a place of socialization. It's a place where you have guests, where you have parties, or your family gathers. And this side of Jung's personality is not featured at all in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. It's so much an account of his inner life. But what about his social life? Who did he have people in for dinner? Did they have guests a lot?
Yes, what I know is that when he stopped his work, then it was over. That means he was not the one to go in the evenings and searching in the evenings. But when it was time for his meal, so he had his meal, and then it was finished. And he was playing. They had games, or they had with the children. And when he was young, he was very sportive. So he went with swimming and sailing and riding and all kind of things. So he was not. This, and I think for myself, it's that he was strictly working in this hour. He's doing this, and he did anything else, but it was this time reserved for this, and so he's durch. Also,
You
he really
followed through? Yeah.
Yes, he was really very strict. So this was for the secretary, this was for this patient, and this was for.
Now it's dinner time.
Then it's dinner time. Then it's everything is over. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, and he read krimis. Is that krimis?
Mystery stories.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, mysteries.
Mystery stories.
Mysteries, yeah.
Detective story.
Detective stories.
Detective
yeah.
stories, and he liked them. And some people said, "What he did that?" And of course, it was this. It was a way of everything. This kept him
A kind
away
of
and
escape.
yes,
yeah,
yes, 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 yes.
yeah. And I think, as I recall, Freud visited that house.
Yes, yes.
Did he stay in the house, or? In a guest
I
room,
think
or?
so, but I don't know it.
Yeah.
But I think he was staying there for some
Yes.
days, and I think he was for some few days. was
Several
staying.
days,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
I
yes.
think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So we may have one more question on this end at Sonoma.
Yes, go ahead. Then we have one from Asheville if we have time, but go ahead, Sonoma.
Okay.
Hi, this question is for Andreas. Being an architect yourself, I'm wondering if you have plans to build a house for your soul.
Being the grandson of Jung is difficult sometimes, even if you have to start your life. So when I had to decide what to study and how, I always compared with this grandfather, and this was rather difficult. But anyhow, when I started to study architecture, I tried to connect the separated architectures, the traditional one and the modern one. I tried to connect them. I did not find a solution. And until now, I have no one seen. Well, there are some few people to do so. But anyhow, I worked my life long as a conservator. So I was conservating monuments. And as such, of course, I was conservating the house at Seestraße in Küsnacht 2. I did this. I was looking for old houses, and I liked it very much because there is history and personality of the house and personality of the people, and all this together. It was really my thing to do. So I was not building a house for myself, but
Restoring old houses and tradition and
But,
maintaining tradition. Yeah.
But of course, I was always connecting because the two worlds we live in, we sorted. How do you say? Yes, so we are. I can't do without the world of psyche somehow, but I do it my way. Yes,
I do it my way.
Well, we have time for probably one last question, and maybe two if we squeeze them in. But there's a Asheville question, so go ahead with your question if you would. Yeah, you can speak right into that.
Seeing the kitchen at the tower in Bollingen, I thought again of your grandfather's description of going into the kitchen and the pots and pans and utensils had rearranged themselves or they moved. I wondered if it's not too personal, has the family, as you continue to be in Bollingen and possibly even in Seestrasse, have you had other times of, I guess, psychic manifestations in the house or in the tower?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yes, I don't think so. Yeah, well, you know, Jung, of course, he was like a radar.
Radar.
A very, very big one. That's the biggest one you have today. And of course, he would feel that. And for us, we are in a much smaller scale. And but somehow, yes, you have little things, not big one things. But one thing that Bollingen, it somehow, if I go there, it's still the same. I felt when I was a boy and when Jung was still alive. So, because the things are still on its place, not all of them, and of course each one lives it in a different way. Somehow the spirit is still for me, for my impression, is still there. And it's as in the library. It was renewed well, now, somehow a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the feeling that you still smell the tobacco.
Tobacco.
You don't, do you know he died in 61, and we think it's still, and so it's not only the tobacco, it's more than only the tobacco.
The smell of the odor of the spirit is
Yes,
there.
yes. But it's not the answer of your question, but we are somehow ready for it, but yes, you know. But it could happen,
Yes, well, thank you. Couple of thoughts, and then we'll close. And if you want to, Marie, do you want to say anything before I kind of sign us off? Do you have any concluding comments? I'm just going to announce March 31st again, but do you have anything you want to say before we wind down?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to Andreas for coming and sharing his life experience. And I do think the feeling is communicated that he is, he's carrying with him in his words and in his spirit, the spirit of his grandfather is living on, and we're very privileged to have him here with us today, and I think we've all felt that. You carry it very well, Andreas.
Yes, absolutely. We can't thank you both enough. But Andreas, certainly your presence has been such a gift to us. There's been such a feel of this seminar, very different from the other seminars. The other seminars have been, very good as well, but this one has a real kind of sacredness. I mean, we really feel your grandfather's energy and presence. I look at your face, I can see characteristics of him. The way you speak, the photographs, there's just a wonderful presence, and we really, really do want to thank you for that. Just to remind people, today was from the ETH University, as well as Sonoma State and the University of North Carolina, Asheville. ETH in Zurich, we are so pleased to be connected with. And the next one on March 31st, which is a Thursday, we're shifting to a Thursday, is going to really focus on the professorship years of Carl Jung, and particularly Angela Graf-Nold and Reinhard Nesper, both professors, will be looking at some of these professorship years. And a particularly interesting part of that is quantum physics. Many of you know that quantum physics has some overlap in these areas, and Dr. Reinhard Nesper has written some on that, and Angela Graf-Nold is a real expert in ETH years. So we haven't prepared the full emails for that yet, but we'll send that out at some point, so do be thinking about that. And so, in conclusion,
Send it, God.
marvelous day. We really appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you again. Yes, thank you again.
Thank you. But I want to thank you because you did this. You're out of my